Hi, my name is Jayreid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. And today I'd like to talk about another belief often held by survivors of scapegoated abuse, which is, I am always one mistake away from complete ruin. The belief today, which is, I am always one mistake away from complete ruin, has a function to really isolate the child's focus and awareness on this particular moment with a great deal of felt pressure to kind of make sure everything is perfect almost at all times. But the experience of the child is that they don't sort of have to look outside of that moment, like look at their recent past or look too far ahead. And this sort of feature, which kind of creates a snapshot by snapshot experience of oneself and life and even of one's life story, is really useful when one has to repeatedly endure awful encounters with a parent. We just zoom out. Here's someone whom we're born to expect to be met with, kindness and support, and instead, in these cases, are often met with cruelty and disregard. That's an experience that can often beget despair, and that despair can get heightened if it's sort of made aware of by the child. So as we think about it, that's not adaptive during one's childhood to be aware of how despairing the circumstances for the scapegoated child actually are. So similar to the other beliefs we've discussed, this belief of I am always one mistake away from complete ruin really sort of shifts the conscious attention away from how unsolvable their predicament is with the narcissistic parent to get everything that you can think of done and done now, otherwise complete ruin is right around the corner. So it sort of like can create a hyper focus on what's happening right now. And I've often heard folks remark that even if they sort of objectively have checked all the boxes they might have in their mind, there can still be this nagging, unnamed sort of dread that they have forgotten to do one thing or the other, and it's going to come to upend all their good efforts. So one way this could manifest in adulthood might be being on the job and just feeling like feeling it almost quite literally impossible to credit oneself for a job well done. That's very antithetical to the function of this belief, because it would imply that it's safe to sort of rest on one's good work. And it's not so much the content of the belief that says no, you can't do that, but more this function I'm referring to, that the belief is sort of in place in order to keep one sort of in that frenetic mode of doing, and keep the awareness of just how much cruelty and mistreatment is likely on the horizon for the child at one time and the adult now. Another benefit of this belief of I'm always one mistake away from complete ruin is that the job is never done. One is always having to feel like there's something they've left undone. And what I've found a lot of the time is that can actually be a very effective way to reduce a narcissistic parent's contempt for particularly the scapegoated child. So if we just review real quickly, for the scapegoated child, it's often his or her just very existence and the traits they possess that can evoke the narcissistic parent's own sense of worthlessness. So what that means is that the child faces the predicament of simply, by waking up in the morning and, coming across the gaze of the narcissistic parent, they risk sort of triggering in the parent that parent's own awareness of what they do not possess that they perceive the child to possess, and who often the child actually does have the qualities that the narcissistic parent wishes they had. So the kid knows at some level that to just be and sort of walk around could be taken as an act of provocation by the narcissistic parent. But if the child adopts this type of a belief, that could result in the child always sort of having a furrowed brow, being at work and sort of like occupied or preoccupied with something. That can often allay some of the contempt held by the parent, because they would sort of see the child as not in a state of sort of well-being or kind of like, happy to be who they are, but rather in sort of more of a hand-wringing state of being. And it could sort of imply to the parent that, well, I don't need to kind of beat them down any further. They're already sort of thinking about themselves in the way I want them to think of themselves. And that is usually in a way that is, in essence, inferior to that narcissistic parent. It's I think, ingenious strategy to carve out a way to survive life with a parent who is scanning the child and looking for the slightest reason to unload hostility and an attack on them. And those reasons could be, in essence, anything that does not comply with the narcissistic parent's mandate that he or she is superior to that child. I wanted to distinguish this belief from the belief discussed last week, which was, if I'm not being productive, then I'm worthless. Last week's belief really was about how the scapegoated child might work to manage their own sense of self-worth in a way that doesn't offend the narcissistic parent, but it's also more about the survivor's kind of self-concept, or as they reflect on themselves, sort of what they feel in terms of how do they appraise themselves as in terms of their own worth. Today's belief of I am always one mistake away from complete ruin is a little more process-oriented, where it's more sort of around like, okay, I just got to always be on, in essence, because there's inevitably something I haven't done, thought of, and so forth, and it's much more sort of about being in that kind of low-key, frenetic state within, because, again, I think it's just, it's a buffer to know that, like, well, if I'm in this state of tension, I'm not able to be kind of full of myself. I'm not going to be feeling the good feelings that can really get me in trouble under the watch of my narcissistic parent. Well, thanks for watching today. I look forward to next week's video and continuing this discussion on the kinds of beliefs that are often held by survivors of narcissistic abuse.